Hello, this is Dale Matthews, and Mike Jones is here too. Hello, Mike Jones. I'm glad you're here too.
Hi, Dale.
Hi. I,
I'm trying to be
Mike has
safe,
told.
but I don't want to say anything that might get me into trouble.
Oh, I say all kinds of things that get me into trouble. Mike has told you a bit about his background in the past. I thought I might share with you just a little bit about my background as a kind of a segue into this whole thing that we're doing tonight. When I was in school, started around sixth or seventh grade, I got real interested in things like pattern recognition. We've talked about that before. And there were a couple of times I got sort of plunked down into my own little science class with me and a teacher. What can I get for you? Well, I'm interested in non-Euclidean geometry. Yeah, yeah. So once I got out of high school and all and went into college, I got recruited to go out to Washington, D.C. and to work with a couple government entities that were interested in gathering information about people from other countries and looking at the patterns of what they were doing and also sharing information about America. And
Oh,
so,
you're the guy. You're the
yeah.
guy. You're the one who started all of this.
Yes, and sharing information about what we're about, not so much about politics, but about almost everything else with other countries, and also sharing some of the information that we had gathered about other countries with. I think I could call them bad governments. Geez, sounds like a theme, huh? And sharing that with other people that we interpreted as being better governments or good governments.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. Pattern recognition kind of stuff. That was kind of a continuing theme. Anyway, one of the things that I noticed that kind of surprised me in working with some broadcasters from the Middle East was some of the unintended consequences of watching American television. For example, I wouldn't have thought that something like the Jay Leno show would be interesting in Saudi Arabia or whatever, because you're not going to understand most of the jokes. But he was very popular there, and I suppose now whoever's taken over for that guy, I don't know. I don't have time to watch that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That they're also popular, but how is that possible? But I never really got a good explanation. We just think he's funny, but you won't understand any of the jokes. One of the things, though, that I would do, and I kind of do now with Mike, is look at things from a different perspective, a different way of seeing things. No big deal, just weird. And
Mm.
so one of the things that I thought was very interesting about this, that was an unintended consequence of things like the Jay Leno show being so popular in the Middle East, is the messages that they were getting that nobody was saying. For example, you go to those places, it's like going to a Native American casino or something. Have you been to one recently and you walk in the door, it's like, whoa, there's an awful lot of cigarette smoke. I mean, it's like everywhere. I've stopped in one of these places I thought I was going to have a steak dinner or something. I couldn't stay. I mean, it just, I'm not even sure I could taste the thing. That's how far away I am from marijuana smoke or tobacco smoke or any kind of smoke, except for our atmosphere these
Yeah,
days.
forest fire smoke. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can do.
really. You're breathing that stuff. Okay, all right.
Yes,
So, and
it's
I
crazy.
was in California breathing other stuff which was in the air. That's nice. Did remind me of LA the other day here. Um, so I one of the things that they do a lot in the Middle East and in Europe is smoke, 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 smoke. It's kind of like watching, some old movies from the 20s and the 30s, Nick and Nora, and they're always drinking. They were always drinking, and everybody was smoking all the time. And now you don't see that. Well, one of the unintended consequences of them watching the show that was so popular, the Jay Leno show, is nobody on that show smokes. And they treat women with a lot of respect. They had guests on that were women. And sometimes a scientist would come on. Oh, a scientist going to be a woman? And this was a revelation to these Middle Eastern broadcasters, just to the people running the stations, much less to their audience. How much more to their audience? Nobody in America smokes, it would seem to them.
Mm-hmm.
And our films are really, really popular there. I mean, Bollywood might be popular in India, but Hollywood is popular everywhere. And there's very little, comparatively speaking, very little smoking in these. And men and women, there's another theme, are considered to be pretty much equals in a number of things. Really? And is this small thing, seemingly small thing, was having some kind of consequences in the Middle East. See, and so that's what I would do, is I would try to see these things and, well, I never really thought of it that way. Yeah, well, that's kind of, warped me. Kind of like non-Euclidean geometry. Anyway, one of the things that I could see when I was in high school, and probably all of you did too, is this thing about safety first. Why, we shouldn't be smoking because smoking's not good for you. I mean, smoke. The government says don't smoke. It wasn't always that they did so. Well, but show that picture of from the movie there, if you will, Mike.
Okay.
Now, this guy, I mean, right now the picture is so iconic, it's almost comical. I mean, the hat and all the rest of that stuff. But you see, there he is, he's smoking. And it's Humphrey Bogart, right? I'm kidding.
No.
I know. And he would ride a motorcycle and all, and you would think of James Dean. James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause. James Dean, taking his life in his own hands and decided, this is not James Dean, and deciding to to kind of live a carefree life where you ride a motorcycle, you fast women, you live fast, you die young, leave a good looking corpse. Now, Jimmy Dean was another example of somebody that took his own life in his hands by eating so much pork sausage. But James Dean, what? James Dean was a guy that, rebel without a cause. And in the movie that we saw that still from there, one of the questions they ask Marlon Brando is, what are you rebelling against? And he says, what do you got? Right. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up,
Yeah.
boy, that's a long introduction. The reason I'm bringing this up is recently
Yes.
we saw the health director here in Josephine County talking about they were getting some more money from the state government and the federal government to fight against tobacco, to tell people about the dangers of tobacco. Look, my grandmother was alive. They called them coffin nails. So it's not exactly as if we didn't know at all that tobacco wasn't good for you. But when you think back, can you remember back to high school? When you think back to those times, kids weren't smoking because they thought that that this was something that they had to do, or they were already addicted to it. Who would want all that stuff down their lungs? They were doing it because they were trying to rebel against authority, because it was a cool thing. Riding a motorcycle was cool, and like this guy did, and smoking was cool, and that stuff was cool because it was rebelling against authority, because the governments or your parents or whoever said don't do that. And unprotected sex and maybe some drugs and smoking cigarette and drinking a lot of beer and staying out all night or not going to the library like I did or whatever. I mean, that was part of rebellion, Mike.
Yeah, surest thing in the world to get a teenager to do something is to tell him not to do it. I mean, it worked for me.
Right.
I did a lot of stupid things as a teenager that just because, it was generally considered something that was not good to do. And listen, it wasn't a secret. There was PSAs all through my upbringing on TV about, the dangers of cigarette smoke. The Surgeon General's warning was on the side of the cigarette box from as early as I could remember. And so, it's not like no one knows this stuff.
Can we see you again, Mike? So, sure. So unless that is you, I don't think it is.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, okay.
This is a animatronic puppet here.
Okay. Yes. No jokes. Okay. So, my point on this is, okay, so we're spending a lot of time and money in the county, in the state, in the country, persuading people that they shouldn't smoke. Well, I think that we get more of a reaction from it being on from it not being on TV or not in movies, which was my original point, than we do from sitting kids down in school and saying you shouldn't do this because it's not good for you. They know it's not good for them. I'm not saying
Yeah.
don't stop it. It's just that, the idea, it seems a bit anachronistic now to say to these kids, well, look, this is your authorities are telling you. The authorities are telling me. That's enough to make me want to do it.
Listen,
When I'm rebelling.
They smoke marijuana, they do other drugs, and they drink hard alcohol, and we know all of that stuff is bad, and have been told that it's bad all of our lives, and yet, people in their rebellious years still do that.
Right, and they do it because of the. Is anything? Does it seem strange to you, Mike, that there's a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms?
Yeah,
that's things are good for you.
It's an odd combination. I expect that they'll add marijuana to that, but that has nothing to do with. That only has to do with the fact that here's a bureau that regulates these things. It has nothing to do with, it's
about them being bad for you. Well, obviously it does trace back to the 20s and 30s during Prohibition,
sure,
where people were making a fortune from not paying the taxes on cigarettes. It wasn't that they were making them, hand rolling them. They just didn't want to pay the state taxes on those things, or on alcohol, which harkens all the way back to the beginning of this country. And they were using firearms, and they were using souped up automobiles, which ended up in NASCAR.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so and that unusual perspective again. Anyway,
I hope we're going somewhere, because we've established that people do dangerous things as young people to rebel against authority. Bingo, got it.
Okay, it's the spending of money to try to influence people, and the role of government. Should it be the role of government to put these protections on you to keep you safe? I would submit to you, Mike, that the role of government here locally would be to make sure we have enough patrols and that kind of stuff so that we can keep people safe. But we're all going to decide, a couple of times I've told you about lectures I've given, small lectures to groups of students or other kinds of people who, where it was supposed to be a lecture about safety first. Well, safety is our number one priority, usually would be the title of the thing. And I would get up and I say, it's not our number one priority. What? No, but we asked you to come in, and no, it's not. Because if safety was your number one priority, you wouldn't even be at this meeting. You would have stayed at home. It's the balance. Once you decide what the cost-benefit analysis is, just exactly like what's happened in our county with the number of police officers that we have. Because there are many places where they say you've got to have a certain percentage of one officer to every 500 people or whatever. Maybe that doesn't exactly work for Josephine County.
Right.
We've discussed many times, you and I, Mike, about maybe with the sort of independence of our county and with the way that it's spread out, and a lot of people living in the hinterlands, if you want to call them that, they've decided, I don't want to pay this extra tax because I'm not going to see a patrolman anyway, and so I might as well just handle some of this myself, but, I would like them to be there if somebody's banging on my door. What are your thoughts about that, Mike?
Well, my thoughts on that are that's exactly what I do. It's a cost-benefit analysis for me because the street that I live on, nothing happens here. Literally nothing. It's very, very quiet. So if they raise my property taxes by, $500 a year, I'm going to see exactly zero difference in the level of service that I get. Zero. There's not going to be any more. It's all going to be concentrated somewhere else where there is a greater concentration of people who like to commit crime for one reason or another, or a problem neighborhood where there's domestic violence going on all the time. We don't have that on this street. I'm saying maybe it's happening 2 streets over. I have no idea. But the bottom line is it wouldn't change my situation at all. That, cost benefit analysis done.
Well, we've talked a lot on this show about dedicated funds. This is a show about politics. Dedicated funds coming down from the state especially. And they've decided that instead of having dedicated funds that are dedicated to keeping us safe with patrols, for example, that there's going to be dedicated funds in this case to teach young people why smoking cigarettes, and older people why smoking cigarettes is not good for them. Really, is that more important than this other thing? I mean, somebody's got to bug up somewhere saying, hey, listen, we've really got to stay on top of this. Well,
I mean, what are we referring to exactly here?
Well, that we're going to show a video clip which fits in with the whole idea of women, infant, and children and breastfeeding and such things like that. But it also matches with the idea of, how much resources, how much thinking do we need to do? How many more people do we need to dedicate in our own health department here in Josephine County to use up the funds that have been made available by the state to teach people about the evils of tobacco? Really?
Yeah, you know what? I can pretty well sum up my feelings on this pretty succinctly. I wish that they would stop taking our money, splitting it up into these little micro roots that go off into nowhere, and then feeding it back to us one drip at a time, but only for this and only for that and only for this. You know what? I mean, we would be a whole lot better. Let's knock off all the dedicated fund stuff. And because of the fact that we're knocking off all the dedicated funds, we don't have to have all these programs that they're no doubt going to be talking about here. We won't have to have those because, listen, I personally, I don't need my government to help me with every little problem that I'm having in my life. I don't need that because I have myself. I'm self-reliant. And, in my formative years, I had a family that I could go to, just like my son, if he needs something, which he did at the beginning of this program. I was furiously texting back and forth with my son, trying to help him out with a headlight problem.
Don't be furious, be kind.
But yes, but I was talking about the speed, not the tone.
I know.
Yeah, I don't need government to tell me what to do. I don't need government to try and tell me how's the best way to live my life. I don't need government to hand me $3 for some milk and $2 for some eggs or something like that. I don't need that from them. And I understand there's a lot of people, probably a lot of people in this county that use that stuff. And, listen, if we were talking about a perfect world situation, the federal government wouldn't have their boot on our neck and the economy would be functioning here and we wouldn't need all these handouts left and right. And we wouldn't need them. You would think that they would want that better, because then they don't have to worry about little Josephine County over there. Josephine County can take care of itself. But no, they seem to like, getting into all of your business. See, because now smoking isn't just a choice. Now this becomes something that government is very, very interested in having control over, because now it can be said that you're damaging your own health. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with everybody, because you're a part of the pool. You are but a member of the masses. And we're all in the same insurance pool. And when you do bad and dangerous things, this makes it bad for everybody. So we have to control everybody. We have to make sure everybody doesn't do these things. And oh, by the way, if you see your neighbor doing dangerous things, you be sure and report them. Okay? This is the kind of society that we're coming to here. So when they flood us with little teeny funds for doing little make work do gooder things, and there's two things that's happening there. One is you're making dependence of your citizens, and the other thing is you're making the government dependent on having, because they're skimming the middle out of that. They are. This is they become dependent on these funds coming in, and then they can't they can't function without them, and then that just keeps the all the tentacles of the multi-tentacle beast alive. And you know what? I would love to just take a machete and whack about 90% of them off, because I just think we'd all be better off. If we had just the basic, simple functions of government happening in this county. Safety. That's number one. That is number one. It comes before, hiring a public health nurse. What? Really? Yes. Yes, it does. Funding the sheriff is more important than that. And so why we don't think that, or why we don't demand of our government to operate in that way? But how bizarre! How bizarre is that? Anyway, that's my tirade. Sorry.
One of the ways that I agree and disagree is that there's been plenty of people who say we should turn down all grants that have strings attached. Well, all grants are going to have strings attached. They want to be sure you're spending the money rightly. And we have a perfect example, the perfect example here in Josephine County. If the county commissioners were spending the money correctly, then there would be no beef about them and you wouldn't be watching this show. But they're not. And because
if they weren't putting a gun to your head and taking the money from you in the first place, then there wouldn't be a reason for them to give the money back to you and want to know how you're spending it.
That's correct. That is correct. And increasing dependence, the other side of that, increasing dependence on grants makes you actually start the county government actually start working for the grant to get the grants as the final answer instead of what they're supposed to be doing with it.
Yes, which is solving the problem that, of course, hang on a second. Let's be very, very clear. Government does not intend to grant you money to solve a problem. They have no interest in that. They want the dependency that they're fostering here. But exactly what is intended is exactly what happens. The government becomes dependent on that, and so they lose any interest at all in solving the problem. If there was some good news, and the good news being that, hey, we've solved that problem, we don't need that money anymore. Boy, would you see some people screaming downtown.
Well,
because they think differently than we do.
We had talked earlier about J.J. Schofield, who's the HR director for the county, and what a great opportunity this is for him, even in Josephine County. Working for the government, yes, because he's getting everything that he wanted. And we showed you a clip a couple of days ago about Simon Hare talking about things where they were going to try to keep it out of the public view about all the new people that they're hiring. Keep in mind when Simon Hare says, when I came in, why, they had just gotten rid of a bunch of people, and boy, the size of our government dropped in half. What he's not telling you, and we've tried to impart to you before, is that the reason that happened is that there were a whole bunch of people, there was over 100 people, as I recall, that were working for the mental health part. Really, that many people? Yes, really, that many people of the county government, and the government here decided that they were going to outsource that. So instead of working for the county government, all those people would work for a private concern. It would be a kind of a county, a public-private partnership. And then there was a whole bunch of things that went wrong where money was lost big time because one of the people in county government said, oh, by the way, we're doing this and that to the union, and if you don't like it, and man, they quoted him, and we got socked with huge, huge, huge fines because they were trying to break up the union. And they didn't like that. And there were federal rules against trying to do that kind of thing. So this whole idea of, well, we cut the government in half. They were doing it to try to save money and do it to try to break the union.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they got in trouble. It's because that's what they were trying to do. So, oh, look at
Okay,
what
now
happened before I got here. Before he got here, that's when it happened for Simon Hare. There's nobody left from that administration anymore. Go ahead, Mike.
And here's what'll nuke me from ever holding office. I would really love to break the unions, because the unions don't really have a place, in my opinion. They don't really have a place in the public sector. I mean, imagine this. The board of commissioners are the public sector. Okay. And so they're the ones negotiating with the union for public sector wages and benefits. Seems like a conflict of interest to me. It seems
does.
like that ought to be happening out in the open, where everybody can then say, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean you're going to spend such and such on these people? And, oh, wait, no, you can't do that. That's what the union will come in and spend $100 million squashing you like a bug. That's their thing. They quash this stuff as soon as they can. However, interestingly, it was done in Wisconsin by Scott Walker. Said, hey, listen, you need to, these people need to be able to have a choice as to whether to be in or not. And 50% of the people, when given the choice, opted out of the union. That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Now, I'm going to present part of the other point of view. When
Okay.
I was working with the government, one of the things that happened, I mentioned to you this before, we had a very, very weak union where I was working, and I didn't join because everybody knew that it was weak. And so when the management folks said to me, we'd like you to falsify these documents, and I said, no, I didn't have to think about it. I didn't even give it 2 seconds. I said, no, I can't do that. There was no union person to go to say, hey, now you're going to suffer retaliation, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a pension today, and there'd be a lot of money, but I don't have that today because I refused to go along with that program. But I had no one to stand up for me. And when I just done this thing with our local high school, Grants Pass High School, and the principal, I started off on the wrong foot with this guy right from the beginning, because I wasn't going to be using photocopied textbooks, which is violating the law, stealing money really from the textbook manufacturer. And I started off wrong. Well, there was no union to go to, because as a substitute teacher, I'm not sure, but I don't think I was even qualified. Yes, you were. Well, I didn't know that, to join any union. And maybe they could have stepped forward and said, we're the big bad union for teachers, which is fun to hate. But they might have said, hey, you can't retaliate against this guy for doing that. Well, but so there was no one to protect me.
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's the difference. Okay, and that's fine if that's your thinking on that. That is completely fine. I personally put myself in another place, and that is that if I don't like what's going on at the job that I'm working, I go somewhere else.
Well,
and I don't blame anybody.
I ended up doing.
And I don't make a big stink.
Yeah.
No, and I understand that, but there are two distinct schools of thought when we're talking about how to deal with this.
Yes.
And there are some people that go, I'm a victim, and they want, to get all this representation. They want somebody to fight the battle for them. If you don't like what's going on, move on. Go somewhere else. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened. The times when I was not having a good time at the job that I was at, and I moved on to other things, it was really the best thing for me.
Well, I did that. And as I said, I didn't have to think about it twice, because I got another boss I have to answer to, rather than that dingy boss who wanted me to do that. Okay. And of course, they were going to gather around that guy and support him. Well, he wouldn't falsify the documents. No, I wouldn't. Well, he's not a team player. That's right. I can't be part of that kind of team. I can't. It's against the rules. It's against his rules. Right. And there wasn't any way I was going to do that. But so I lived with that, and I live with the fact I don't have a pension now, and I'm happy I made that decision. As I said, I've never had to go back and reconsider it.
Whoa! Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. This is assuming that after that job, you could never, ever get a job that accumulated a pension ever again, which of course is not true.
No.
So it's, you made some choices, and now you got to live with them, just like everybody in this world.
Yeah.
And I wish that we would be a whole lot more in that vein. In the way that we live, we'd have a lot less problems than we do right now. For one, people would have standards of behavior that are better, because I understand that in order to not get myself in trouble with my neighbor over on this side, I have to have a standard of behavior, and we have people now that want to act badly and then be protected for having done it. That's ridiculous.
No, I know that, but if we can go back to the beginning of unions, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, with all those girls that were locked in and died. Flames, had to jump out the windows. I understand how it started. I understand how it went wrong. I understand the Teamsters Union and that kind of stuff, and the things that happen with that. There are reasons for some of these things, like all the warnings on a ladder, or let's be safety first all the time. There are some reasons for that, like my shaver, where don't cut this with scissors. I know why some of those things
that's
are
over
there.
Litigiousness is what makes
that's true. That's true. So it's a little of both. It's like, the banning of nuclear power in America, because some people were stupid and greedy.
Yeah, but listen, I'm not saying that unions should go away. There's a valid function for unions, but not in the public sector.
You'd like them to be reasonable, at least.
I'd like them to be Listen, we spend, $10, $12, $14,000 a student, and we get crap as a result.
Yes.
That is the result that we get from that, because no one is holding them to a standard. And, there was a number of examples that I saw just today where anytime the government is involved in doing so, there was a tape that came out about the VA, and some guy is sitting there in the VA hospital, and he's taking his video camera around and showing all the empty chairs. There's nobody in this hospital. There's these guys, and they're all out on a lunch break or something like that. And, they treat, the veterans pretty badly. And why is it that a government entity always ends up devolving to that, whereas you go to a private entity, and generally speaking, that doesn't happen? So we should not be relying on the public sector to do anything but the basic functions of government, because they can't handle much more than that. They really can't.
And sometimes can't handle that. Now, you and I both know that when Simon Hare first ran for office, and he doesn't have a union, when he first ran for office, he said, I'm not going to take PERS. Well, once he decided to run again, he apparently started thinking about that. Yes. Once you get to 5 years, then you're set for life.
Well, I need to know.
Life. Okay, just a second. One more thought. Yeah. Set for life. So what he did is he went to the county commissioners. Remember, he ran the first time, and one of the planks of his platform is, I'm not going to take PERS. Now they have granted him PERS retroactive.
Yeah.
Now this kid is going to, and how old is he? 22.
36.
Yeah.
22. He's like 36.
And this guy is now going to be getting paid for the rest of his life, because if we don't offer retirement benefits for the rest of your life to commissioners like Cheryl Walker, why, we won't get the top quality.
Oh my God.
How's that been working out for us?
And listen,
why did they get retirement at all?
I would hate to think that what the representation that we have in this board right now is the top end. That would be very bothersome.
You've heard them say about themselves. You've heard Simon say this is the best board we've ever had in the history of Josephine County.
Oh, yeah. And again, he's 36 years old. What reference does he have? He was watching SpongeBob here 20 years ago.
Was it that long ago? Okay,
but no, SpongeBob is still on. But what I'm saying is, 20 years ago he was watching SpongeBob. 20 years ago, I was, 35 or whatever. So
yeah. Well, we all went to school in the 1900s. I get it, but look, the point is that that. And getting back to the videotape, is that what's happening now is that we're living on these grants, and we're doing things to get the grants so that we can continue getting grants. And so we're going to play this video in pieces and then talk about what we're seeing here and try to put some perspective on it. You ready to do that, Mike, or you want to say
Oh
something
yeah.
else first, bud? Okay.
No, no, no.
Go ahead and play the first little part of this tape. Oh, just before you play it, what they're talking about here is, and J.J. Schofield, the HR director, human resources director, starts it off by talking about the fact that the number of patients that they've seen in the Women, Infants, and Children's program, WIC program, has dropped precipitously. And he's going to talk with the lady from public health, not Diane Hoover, but one of the people working with the WIC program, about how that's come about. Go ahead, Mike.
Has it been 3 years in a row now, I think?
Yeah, it's been 3 years in a row that our caseloads have been dropping, and so our funding is based on our assigned caseload from the state. So as we take a snapshot of February and March, they determine our funding for the next year, and 3 consecutive years it's dropped, and it's dropped again this year.
I mean, this makes my case for me. It's like, oh, we can't have that. What we need to do is we need to send agents out into the community to cause problems that will bring our caseloads up so that we can continue to have this funding. How stupid is this? I mean, how long did it take us to get here? Why can't we go back?
What they said elsewhere in this is, well, do you think that there's no need? Oh, there's more need than ever. There's more need than ever to teach women that it's a good idea to breastfeed their babies and to make sure that they feed their children appropriate foods. And so what we need them to do is, they do some public outreach, but most of their work is sitting at a table waiting for people to come in. And they come in and they say, have you thought about feeding bread to your family? And this whole thing about milk is just a mystery to me. Now, maybe there's plenty of milk. There's probably some dairy people out there. But the whole idea that we're going to feed a milk from a cow to a baby, I don't know, that just seems weird to me. But, it's one of the 4 basic food groups sponsored this week by your local dairy.
Listen, and someday when we have some time, we'll get into the food pyramid and how screwball it is. And but we don't have time today. Continue, please.
Okay, so what she's just said to us here is, taking this apart, looking at it, analyzing it, the patterns and everything. What she just said is, we're not getting as much money as we used to because we don't do as much service as we used to, which kind of seems to me to be somewhat appropriate, unless your goal is to get more funding. And if that's your goal, then this is a disaster.
Yes, it's a perpetual motion machine, for crying out loud. Ronald Reagan used to say about welfare, we should be measuring the success of welfare by how many people don't need it anymore. Instead, they're measuring the success of these programs by how, oh my gosh, the need is just unbelievable. It's out of control. We can't keep up with it. It's crazy.
Well, there's one tape that we should play every few days, and that was Diane Hoover from Public Health, who came into the commissioners, you may recall this, and said, I got good news for you. And Keith Eck was like, oh, okay, good news. Yes, our infant mortality rate is up. And that means, it chokes me up.
Yes.
That means we're going to get more money because, and Jackson County opted out of the program altogether, but we're going to get more money because our infant mortality rate is up. And they're going, whoa, that's pretty good. What? Right. If honestly, now you saw the tape. If that's the goal, is to get more money, well, of course they're saying this is good news.
It counter incentivizes. And listen, I think we become a sick, discombobulated nation because of stuff like this. But specifically, you should take a cue from this. This is how different these people think than you do about the money that you need to make your life work.
Well, this is why I wanted to play this tape, because I realized they're talking about something which to you is probably, kind of a small thing, but this kind of thing happens every week, sometimes every day, where they're coming in, they're talking about the grants, the grants, the grants, the grants, the grants. And this is a place where grants never pass. That's why they named it that. Go ahead.
We'll pass on the grants. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Play the next part, please.
WIC staff, those two WIC staff were reduced to 32 hours a week when we first had that budget go around. I think it was 2012. And Chris Carlson did some refiguring of the WIC funds that we had. We took Diane's salary out of it, so that way we could justify raising them back up to full time.
Okay, before we get to the part about Diane, which we're going to get to, because they're going to mention this again a little bit later and how they're doing some manipulation of the numbers and all. When they talk about taking people down to 32 hours a week, what does that automatically mean? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I would assume that they're going to lose benefits.
Yes.
And right, yeah, essentially.
And so, honestly, now, and of course, this is something the union fights against all the time. Is if you've got two people working at 32 hours. I'm not going to get the math perfect on this, you know that. Mm-hmm. But if you got two people working at 32 hours a week, in some ways that can be less expensive than one person working at 40 hours a week.
Only because of regulation.
And because of the benefits and all the rest of that stuff.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
And so there's this constant battle between the unions and the administration of every place to make sure that you cut back on the number of extra benefits that the people get. And then that's kind of, in its own way, kind of union busting. Now, one thing about J.J. Schofield is he is here to make sure you hire as many people as possible and get them the highest possible wages. That's probably the way that he learned is HR experience and whatever he brought with him. Of course you do that. He probably sees himself as the good guy, full employment for everybody working for the government on your bank account.
Yes.
So we're the bad guys for bringing this up.
Oh, and listen, I remember the day after the levy failed, he was on social media making comments how stupid we were for not passing the levy.
And he said to me during the budget thing, "You're lying all the time, Mr. Matthews." Well, yeah, from his point of view, he's for full employment for government workers on our dime. And anybody that would stand in that way has got to be the enemy.
And that's the funny thing. This always comes back around to this idea that when you think of nefarious government people, they're scheming in a back room and they look evil and they talk evil and they're easy to identify. That's the devil.
Well, sometimes they are easy to identify.
Yeah, they are. Yes, but bottom line is that they're just people. And they're just people who are looking out for their own best interests. And when you're looking out for your own best interests as government, who's your source of money? The people's pocketbook is your source of money. So that's what you go after, and you're unapologetic about it because that's what makes good government.
So when I go to the elected officials compensation committee for the last 3 years, and this guy's sort of running the show, even though he's not supposed to this time, I said, well, may I ask the question I always ask, which is, shouldn't our elected officials, shouldn't they be paid commensurate with our local economy instead of commensurate with like Portland, which we've talked about? Yes. And this guy, well, I'm going to stop you right there. Hey, why are you stopping me? First of all, you're not even on this committee. And second, it is a valid question. No, it's not valid for 11 reasons. Hey, I'm going to make you be, that's not true. And hey, first of all, I don't need your help. And the second is, of course, it's legitimate to ask that. So what they do is they fill up the elected officials compensation committee with exactly the same people that do exactly the same job for, Asante or whatever, or for the city. And of course, they feel like everybody that works here should be paid a wage that's similar to Portland, because you never know when they might leave here and move to Portland.
Okay.
Next.
And it's also going to give us the opportunity of possibly opening up for 7:15 a.m. clinic I was planning on doing a survey to see if customers would be interested in coming in like before they have to go to work.
Customers.
Yeah.
They're customers.
Yeah. And the other thing, they don't have enough people there. So they're thinking about opening up for a 7:15 clinic as a poll, doing it while taking the poll.
Right.
So maybe people will come in if they offer more hours, and therefore they can get more grants for serving more people, more customers.
Yes.
We're going to come in and ask you pointed questions about breastfeeding. Oh, pointed questions about breastfeeding. That doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Go ahead. Next clip.
They're going to lose grant money if we don't find a way to increase their caseload. And so it's going to cost them money, but if we don't do it, it's going to cost us a reduction in grant money. So,
whoa.
There's
Hang
it.
on a second.
That's the summary.
Yes, that is the summary. That pretty much is. But why does the HR director, number one, have anything to say about it? Number two, care?
Because he views his role as increasing the number of government employees to completely make up for that time when we said goodbye to so many.
Yes, because that was bad. And, adding people, at a burden to our local government, that, by the way, is hanging by its fingernails, is a good thing.
Okay, so a slight little break because of what I'm going to say here. He's had a central role in seeing that Lisa Shipley jumped up not by 5 steps within a ranking, by 5 ranks, way up here. Okay, Lisa Shipley, the person that, in my personal opinion, that should have been fired, not because she never does anything for veterans, but because she told veterans that if they didn't vote for that last levy, not this one, but the one before that, if they didn't vote for it, that they may not get their benefits anymore because there wouldn't be a veteran center, which is a total, complete falsehood. Completely a lie. And she was handing out commissioners' cards, their business cards, so that these poor old dears would call them, I'm worried about my money. Well, you should be vote for the levy. And she came in and reported that to the commissioners. She was doing that during office hours, and they didn't give her a raise then. They waited, and then through J.J. Schofield, they give her this big raise. Now, the reason that was important is because of what happened at today's weekly business session, Mike.
Yeah.
Today's weekly business session. What I think is the news of today. What Keith Heck said.
They were talking about bumping some people up.
No, sorry. Keith Heck decided.
Don't sandbag me if there's something that you have to say about that particular.
I apologize.
Then flip it out there, but don't.
We talked about this ahead of time. All right, so we did talk about this.
We did.
Yes, Sandy Casanelli got up and she said she was talking about an individual person and what that person did as a department head. And Keith Heck I think it was Sandy, stopped the person from speaking and said, no, I've been lax about this in the past, and I've let people talk about county government employees, department heads. I won't allow that anymore. You will no longer be allowed to talk about government employees, including department heads, ever again. Not while he's the chair. So you got Larry Graves, who was cursing some guy out and did it twice after being warned not to do it ever again. Shouldn't have done it in the first place. And you've got other people like Lisa Shipley. You know that I won't be able to get up and say a word about Lisa Shipley or about the guy ahead of IT or about somebody's ahead of the airports or about any possible person working for the county government, pro or con, although they do it about citizens when they're not in the room, because Keith Heck will no longer allow citizens to talk about their county government people, except for the commissioners that are in the room.
And that just reminds me of what Cheryl Walker was doing last year when she said that, you couldn't criticize somebody if they weren't in the room.
And that's when I brought up, well, it looks like we can't say anything bad about Richard Nixon because he's dead.
Right.
Prop him up in the corner, boys. You can't talk about this guy.
But you know what? I mean, what they're talking about is local government. Listen, this is what happens. Apparently, the Ann Basker is a no criticism zone when it comes to local government here. And you can say whatever you could come in there and say whatever you wanted about people in other governments elsewhere, but only praise happens of county employees in that room.
And the proof of that is that this thing about applause, and it sounds like a small thing. You can applaud all you want. In fact, they will lead you in the applause.
Yes, they will.
When it comes to county employees and themselves. But you try to applaud for a citizen who stood up and said something you agree with, he's all over you. No, we're not going to allow that. You can't do well. Next thing you'll be booing. No, that doesn't mean next thing will be booing.
I got up and I said something there, and people applauded, and he said, "Now knock it off, children." Had somebody had a government employee said some line that people found funny or wanted to clap about, there wouldn't have been a thing said. No problem. Clap all you want to. No, it sets the tone. They are up here. We are down here.
Literally.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you could, you're such complainers. Why are you complaining? Well, look, even Rika Brown wasn't allowed in the room today when she tried to bring in some weed with her. Not that kind of weed, the other kind of weed, oh no, I'm not going to allow that. He couldn't see what she had. It was just this green thing that she was holding. Yes. Well, but she's the one who has said more strongly than anybody else, I don't want Dale Matthews, as an example, to be able to say bad things about you, and I'm up here to say good things. Hey, wait a minute, Rika. I want my freedom of speech, but not him.
Right. And in her remarks today, she was kind of protesting his objection a little bit. I thought that was kind of funny. And it was really funny because she came in holding up over the top of her head one of these what is it, puncture weed or what was Keith calling it, bullweed or something like that.
Well, it wasn't nice. Bull something, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, she came in with this big thing. But then she suggested the solution, and the solution was, you people need to get some weed specialists working for the county. She's very, very subtle in her job application.
Who do you think she was talking about? That's right. Yeah, and they were like, well, quite reasonably. It was nice to hear them being reasonable. First we're going to fund public safety.
Yeah.
Think about but here's
that's probably one of the best lines I've ever heard from Cheryl.
But the problem with, she's not going to fund public safety. I mean, theoretically, that sounds right.
Yeah, they had an opportunity to do that. They had an opportunity and they skipped it. Yeah.
I don't think we really need to see any more of that tape. But the point was that they, as J.J. Schofield summed it all up, if you don't play to the grant, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Okay, if you're not playing to the grant and trying to call in more customers, then we're going to be shut down. If the number of babies dying increases, well, we're going to get more money. And she literally said twice in that meeting, there's no mistake, there's good news.
Yes.
Well, for the government, more grants, that is good news. Right. For us, regular citizens, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy if you even watch badcounty.com.